Hello everyone, it's myself Jonathan, also known as the PC Genie. Today we're going to be looking at the subject of studded armour. Now, let's get straight to the point. Was it real? Ever in history? From everything we've seen so far, the answer is no. It's as fake as this synthetic butted mail covered fingerless glove. So no is the answer to that one. Now, could it ever have been a realistic armour? Now, I'd personally say no, and for the following reasons. So, firstly, it's something that would be more expensive than just standard armour because, well, you know, you've got to add the studs and things to it, or the rivets, or whatever you're using. And, you know, you could quite easily get something like, if you're using leather, those are the materials you have, have available. You could have a fairly thick sort of cuirass made of it and have it especially hardened and toughened so that it's not as flexible as the soft pliable leather that you'd usually imagine. It's got more of a hard, solid, almost wood-like or perhaps plasticky kind of texture. Basically something that would be quite resilient to impacts, cuts and thrusts, the usual sorts of dangers that someone might experience in a self-defense or war scenario. So there's that. There are alternatives which are cheaper and are still really good, and that's ignoring the fact that stuff like mail armour, or as some people know it as chainmail armour, was fairly common throughout most of the medieval period, especially as you go later on, so there are even really good armours that you can buy instead. But apart from that, here's an ironic part. Depending on the types of studs, it might actually help to have you receiving damage. And here's why. Of course, it doesn't apply to some types of studs and rivets and things. You might get some which are flat, and in which case, you know, if a blade or something struck those, then actually, yeah, it might help a bit. You've got metal, or whichever you're using, probably steel, but you never know, and that would help to deflect the blow slightly. So that, in its minor sense, would be good. Of course, you're gambling because, you know, you've got to hope and pray that it hits one of those studs and not the main body of the leather. But if you got ones that I see there are sometimes which are rounded or sort of pointy and spiked, like some people seem to enjoy in the idea of studded armour, then if a sword hit or some other weapon hits onto that, or even a point that's being thrust at it, instead of being deflected away like a steel breastplate would do to stop you from getting injured, instead it actually sort of guides and directs the weapon towards you. You're actually making sure it gets caught and gets some purchase, some bite into there. So again, in that sense, it actually makes the armour worse than if you didn't have studs in it. Terrible idea. And finally, well, if you can have all studs and rivets and things put in place and carefully aligned, why not have it holding something in place? And this is a thing. Maybe some of you more astute viewers might have noticed. Obviously, right here next to me, I've got this thing. But what is it? It looks like studded armour. Then why am I poo-pooing it so much? Well, let me put it on and explain to you. So, here it is, it is called brigandine armour. Now, basically, what you see on the outside, and you might see in certain medieval paintings and things like that, are what looks like an ordinary coat made of maybe leather or cloth or some kind of material. On the outside, in this case it's wool, with studs in it. But what these actually are rivets. Like I said earlier, they're holding something in place. In this case, steel. Now, of course, you don't have to take it strictly with the historical brigandine, like in this sort of case here that we've seen from museum examples they're interpreted from. You could easily have examples of materials like horn, bone, wood is perfectly suitable. It doesn't have to be steel, you could use maybe other metals. Heck, if your troops getting just doing more sort of LARP type things, then something like aluminium could act perfectly fine and would have, you know, in a correct thickness, proper defensive capabilities. But as I said, just the studs on their own are not good enough and they don't provide coverage to protect you properly. And that's the key difference in the reason, I think, why such rumours were perpetuated even before the rise of things like Dungeons and Dragons, was actually because of people before, say in the Victorian times and later, having a look at these types of things, especially artwork and representations, where you see these people from the medieval period in war wearing other common armours like plate, mail armour, padded stuff, and then they see, what's this? Some kind of material but with studs and things in it. So they just immediately assumed, right, so I guess studded armour existed. But it doesn't, it's this. So yes, like I said, if you are going to have some kind of armour with extra studs and rivets in place, then, why not use those studs and rivets to hold something in place? It's perfectly historical to see many examples of this, which is Brigandine. There was a similar thing with larger plates, fewer larger plates that is, specifically, which was called the coat of plates simply. And there was also stuff like lamellar armour, scale armour, quite a few will be familiar with, all kinds of things. And that's just in Europe. I mean, going beyond there, like I say, I think there have been examples of things like wood and horn and bone being used in plates and segments within an armour, and quite easily things like rivets and studs can be used to secure them in place. Great idea. So yeah, that's my piece. Comment below your thoughts on these types of armours, and see you later.